Welcome to the cave. This is the ARCS review that you need to see. Okay, I've waited a while. Let me adjust some things here. Get some things in the right place. Sorry about that. We've waited a while to post this review, to talk about this game. As I sit in front of you here and now, it is number 3 on the BGG hotness with, I believe, an 8.3 overall rating. It's nearing the top 1,000 in strategy games. It just came out. But, and this game is full of hype. There's a lot of hype behind it. Comes from an established developer, Leader Games. They've done things like Oath and Vast and Root. And now they've done ARCS. And this is a very tough game to review. But this is the review that you need to hear, because I'm not going to be giving you some jaded opinion from a person who was paid to give a review of this game. I'm just going to give you an honest to goodness review from my standpoint as a gamer. ARCS is pretty much a follow the leader game that also attempts to explore the 4X 4A. There are 2 ways to play the game. There's the standalone. You could play it one time with a group of friends, and then that be that. You get it out, you set it up, you play the game, someone wins, and you put the box away. And you'll probably leave the table intrigued, confused, and maybe even a little disappointed. And then there's the second way you can play the game. And that is, you could play the campaign. Now, that is in a separate expansion. However, I believe that is the way that the game was meant to be played. So without going into too much about how to play this game, I'm pretty much just going to talk about the things that I like, things that I don't like, and my overall thoughts about the game. So throughout the course of the game, you're going to have action cards, and you're going to take different actions. You are going to put down a card, and based on the card that you play, if you're the leader, you're going to determine what action is going to be played for that round. And then the following person can either follow your card and perform, if they surpass the value of your card, they can perform the same actions and more of them, fewer of them, but at a greater cost to maybe win initiative next round. They can copy what you have down and take one action on your card, or they could do what's called a pivot, which means they can play a card that has different actions on it and take one of those actions. Also, they could do something else before they start taking the actions on the card. They can do what's called prelude actions, which means they can pay a resource to carry out an action that may not be present on the card or cards that they want to play or that you've played. This part of the game is great, and it's fun and interactive. And at the start of that game, before any of that takes place, you're also going to get what's called a fate card. And the fate drives different abilities that you might have based on the actions that you're taking. The trick-taking element in this game is brilliant, and I do think it's very well done and it's thought out. It's everything else that kind of lacks, so to speak, in a sense. In my opinion, the heart of this game really lies with the fate cards. And they're essentially like your faction ability, okay? So in the one-off game, you're going to get one of these factions, and it's going to have a different ability on it that's specific to you. It's going to have some setup rules where you're going to put your ships on the table and resources that you're going to start with. In the campaign, you're going to play 3 separate games, what are called ARCS, over the course of different number of chapters. In the base game, the game can last anywhere from 3 to 5 chapters, typically 3 to 5 chapters. It can go shorter. In the campaign game, you're going to have 3 chapters in Act 1, 3 chapters in Act 2, and 4 chapters in Act 3. This is the spirit of the game in the campaign game, the fate cards. These cards right here, this is what you are attempting to do. I believe this is what this game is all about. Having asymmetric factions with different abilities and different objectives to accomplish earning victory points. And again, that part of the game is pretty brilliant. Here's the downfall. The faction you start with may not be the faction you end with. And in fact, if you don't achieve your objective, it's likely that you're going to have to change factions. Even though you had spent this entire game that you just played exploring the faction, learning the faction, trying to figure out what it is that they want to do. I guess let me circle back 1 second before we talk about that. So you're going to start off a campaign act with a token on the victory point track, and you're going to have to count that token down to 0, not up. Count it down to 0. And there's going to be different ways that you count the token down to 0. At the end of the act, for every point that you are above 0, you're going to lose a VP, overall VP. And the VP over in the campaign is cumulative. So everything that you earn in Acts 1 and 2 carry over to Act 3. If you miss out on your objective, though, and if you don't get that little token down to 0, you not only lose VP, but you tend to lose that faction for the rest of the campaign. That's not that big of a deal, and it's not that detrimental. You can recover from these sorts of losses. However, part of the fun of the game is the fate system, the faction system, and figuring out what this faction wants to do and trying to see it through the 3 acts of play, acts A, B, and C. No one in the campaign so far that I've played with has been able to hold on to the same faction for all 3 acts. So maybe that was by design. I'm not sure. But to me, it felt like, oh, shoot. Going from Act 1 to 2, I now have a new faction that I have to master in Act 2 and figure out what they're doing and change and pivot my strategy entirely around that specific faction to try and, again, take this dial, lower it to 0, and earn as much VP as I possibly can. I would almost rather that just be that way. Pick a faction and go with it for all 3 acts and see what you can do. Because there is an alternate win condition at the end of the campaign, and that is if you can satisfy your ultimate, I can't remember what it's called now, but your ultimate objective, you automatically win the game. If 2 people satisfy that objective, then whoever's higher on the victory point track will win the game. So it's follow the leader with some exploration, with some combat, with some political intrigue. There's a court system that you're going to be delegating, sending little delegates to, and you're trying to win these lore or these abilities that you can bring into your faction that help improve the way your faction is playing for that particular act or round. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the game. I wanted to love this game. I really, really did. I legitimately did. I like Vast. I don't like Root. I thought maybe this would be the one for me from Leader that would do it. I'm still a little bit on the fence about that. We'll get to that in a second. But there are things that are very, very, I should say, wrong with this game that I think you should know about. First off, I was an all-in backer when this launched on Kickstarter, and I went all in right away. And one of the things that you get in the all-in pledge are miniatures. And these miniatures are also ink dropped. This might be the worst ink drop job I've ever seen in my life. It's as if they took the miniature, dipped it in a pot of ink, pulled it out, shook it off, and threw it on the table to dry. And then they put them in the box. Not a good look. The second thing about the miniatures is that on the table, excuse me, I'll lower the camera a little bit here so maybe you can see this. So the plastic minis, the all-in minis, are actually of poorer quality than the standard wood miniatures. These are both ships. They do the same thing on the table. When one gets wounded, you tip it over. The second wound it takes, you remove it from the table. The issue that we're having is these miniatures like to tip over on their own. They're extremely unstable, and when you start moving pieces around the game board, it's hard to tell what was wounded and what was fresh. And fresh is important because that's how you dictate control in this game. The wooden miniatures don't have that problem. They have a much wider base. They're not finicky. And when they're wounded, they're completely on their side. And there's no question at all about whether they're wounded or fresh. The same issue happens with the delegate pieces. The delegates, in their wooden form, come with feet so they can stand on the table. When you go to court and you influence these different political objectives, you're going to place these out, and the person with the most, when you go to secure one, will collect them back, and then you take the rest as captives on your player mat. It's kind of a neat little thing. Kind of like when you destroy ships, you take them as trophies on your player mat. The wooden ones don't have a problem of falling over. The Kickstarter exclusives are extremely wobbly, and you can see how it wobbled when I put it down. And they don't like to stand up. They fall over all the time. Ink drop aside, this is poor quality. And it costs more money. So that, to me, is a problem. Now, do the ships look better? Yeah, they look better. Do the delegates look better? Yeah, they look better. They're more detailed. However, they're less useful, and they actually detract from the experience because of their usability. So that, to me, is a negative trait of the game. The next thing that I don't like that I'm going to talk about here, probably in a little further detail, is what I would consider to be the worst game board I have ever seen. And it's not close. So the way the game board works is you have a center circle, and around the circle you have these areas here called gateways, and each of these gateways is numbered 1 through 6. Each gateway is attached to 3 planets. These 3 planets plus the gateway is what's called a system. Adjacency in movement depends upon being in the same system or adjacent to a gateway. Now, let me tell you the problem with the mat that I have, or the board that I have. Clearly, these 2 planets are not adjacent by this big crack in the map. Okay, they artistically drew a way to show the division that these 2 planets are not adjacent. These 2 planets are adjacent. They're in the same system. They're connected to the same gateway. And if you understand that, that's fine. However, look here. These 2 planets are also not adjacent. But there's no big crack in the map to show that. You have to draw all the way back to the gateway and go, oh, wait, they're in a different gateway. They're in a different system, so they're not adjacent. It's a small thing, but when you're playing the game, it actually kind of, when the board gets filled with pieces, it can get a bit confusing for some people, especially your more casual gamers. This game board is horrible in that way. The art design is fine. I have no problems with any of that stuff. I just, the ease of play around this board and the way the systems work, it's just not very well done or very well thought out. And it is so different from the prototype version that they had, where they had these little clusters on the map that were different shades, and you could see what was adjacent to what. I'm not sure why they settled on this version of the game board, but it is what it is, and it's terrible. That's just my opinion. You can, of course, disagree. So I didn't want to go through the rest of the review without addressing some of those concerns that I have with the components in the game, because I do think that the components are an important part of every game. And these components are letting this game down in that way. Let's talk about some of the good things. When you're in the middle of a campaign and you want to stop, maybe you don't have 9 hours that you can finish 3 acts in. And yes, this game does take a while. Much like every other game, I would advise you to pay no mind to the printed time on the board, on the box, because it lies. When you don't want to play anymore, there's a very clever storage system here that you can take all the pieces off of the map and place them in these little bins that are numbered according to the system and planet. That's good. That's great, actually. So you want to play only 1 act in the campaign and save the other 2 for another day. Everybody can take their pieces off the board, shove them in these little envelopes here, and we're good to go. The box is also sorted that way, where you have card dividers that are numbered for each of the fate systems. This is the believer system, and when you pull this out, it will tell you exactly how to set it up, and you'll just pull cards off the deck and you'll earn them as it says to earn them, and then it will tell you when to stop, and that is what you start the game with. When you're done, you can put everything that you are playing with back in the little baggie, and then put it back in its slot in the box, and it's cleverly stored that way. Again, this is something about the game that's positive. This is a good thing, and it's well done. The box organization is great. They thought about this. Every single component from every expansion fits in the same box. You should note, the expansion box is way, way bigger than the core box. And the reason I think that is because they want to fit everything from the expansion in the core box into this one box, and they use the expansion box for that. I thought it was a little weird when I opened my box from Kickstarter, and I saw, oh, look, it's the Blighted Reach expansion. This box is big. And then there's the other game box. That's not big at all. So, however, the storage system is brilliant. There are these trays for everything. This is a community tray that you'll play the game with. Has all the combat dice that you're going to roll. And then it has the resource tokens, which are limited in supply. So once they run out, they're out. You can't get any more of them. Let's see. What else can I talk about? When you're playing the campaign, you get these little individual, when you're playing the regular game, you also get one of these little individual trays that has all your ships and your guys and everything in it. When you're playing the campaign in between acts, you can just store everything from your particular game in one of those trays and have it ready for the next one. We're going to play an Act 3 tomorrow, actually, and finish up a campaign with my gaming group here. My buddies, and not my kids, my buddies. And I'm not going to say that this game's not appropriate for children, because it probably is, but it is. The rule system is fairly simple. It's a difficult game to teach, and it's definitely a difficult game to master. The strategy is layered. It's deep, so those are good things. I like that sort of thing. But yeah, it's not necessarily one that you're going to bring out for the family. I've played this with a couple different groups of people now, and here's what I'll say. Save this for your core gaming group. This isn't one that you're going to bust out at the Airbnb when you're playing on a weekend with some casual friends, and you might be, there might be some libations on the table or whatever. This isn't that type of game. This game requires your attention, requires your thought, and people who are not really true core gamers are probably not going to have that good of an experience with this game in particular. I had one gaming group, in fact, where we had a casual gamer who was doing their best for sure to enjoy themselves, but after the third chapter was pretty much ready to quit the game. And understood at that point that that would throw everything into turmoil, so stayed with us, but thankfully. But that is to say, this one is for the hardcore, in my opinion. If you're going to play it correctly, play it with a group of people who are going to be dedicated to the game. Others will not enjoy themselves. Two things that I'm concerned about with regards to that. One, the runaway leader can be a thing in the campaign, I believe. I've seen it already. It's tough to catch someone who gets way, way out front, even if they have a very tough objective within their fate to complete for the third act. Secondly, if you're playing this game casually, meaning just one version of it and not the whole campaign, or one playthrough of it, it has a very big rubber band effect, or a, hey, they're in the lead, go get them type of thing. That can make the play experience, that can dampen the play experience as well. For the people who are very far behind and out of it, who are then going to feel like they're just doing something to make the other person lose. And for the person in the lead who feels like everyone's ganging up on them. The game is susceptible to those types of experiences, and I feel like you should know that. Those things are not easily mitigated either, so, save your comments on that. If someone, which then also creates a kind of like tertiary problem here, in that someone can for sure play the role of kingmaker in this game. So be careful the audience you choose, and be careful who's good side that night. And the reason being is because you're going to decide how points get scored in the end of the game through one of the 5 tracks or whatever. 5 tracks of scoring. And you could easily just say, well, I'm out of it, but if I pick this track for this one and declare this ambition, then this person will win, but if I don't, then that person might win. So kingmaking is a thing that could happen. Be aware of these things. ARCS is a game that needs to be played more, for sure, to give an official rating on it. As of right now, I will say, the game has provided me with a couple different experiences. One in which I felt like I didn't like the game at all, and I didn't have a very good time. That would be the single playthrough version. And the campaign, which I thought was exponentially better than just playing the game as a one-off, but still kind of filled with some of its own issues. But if this game's going to stick around in the hotness for a while, you're going to get exposed to it. And these are some things you might want to know. Again, just my thoughts and opinions. This is just me being upfront and honest with you from a guy who just plays games and enjoys them, but also knows a little bit about systems. So I guess that's about all I have for you tonight. If you want to see more upfront and honest reviews, kind of like this, that are sort of unscripted, let me know. Give it a like if you like it. Give it a subscribe if you so choose. If you don't, that's cool too. We do a lot of content on this channel with my kids playing live games. Most everything we do is live, just because of the limitations that we have, and we do this for fun because we like to. So I'll see you next time in the cave, and I promise more future content similar to this, and maybe getting some adults involved as well. Take care for now.